All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Monday guest speaker series. Tonight, we have Cathy Slider, who is going to be talking about blockchain with us tonight. So, Cathy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into tech, where you're currently working, how you got
Yeah,
Google?
I'm actually going to go into that on a slide just because it's part of talking about blockchain. But I had a long career in banking and nonprofit work and decided to take the plunge during COVID to do something different, is the short version of it. But we're going to talk about all kinds of good blockchain things tonight.
Okay. And I just made you co-host because apparently when you had to leave, I had to re-add you. So now you should have all the permissions. So I am going to hand it over to you, and I'll be monitoring the chat in case anyone has any questions along the way.
All right, thanks. I'm going to actually stop my video real quick so I can bring this, see what I'm doing. Over here, let me start this. All right, share my screen. Okay, I can't hear anybody or see anybody, so I'm going to assume it's all showing up just fine. And if it's not, Emily will let me know.
It looks lovely.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. All right, so it's really good to be with you all tonight. We're going to talk about blockchain and how it goes way beyond crypto. It is just so much more than Bitcoin, and I'm not making any assumptions or presumptions about what you all know about it, but I'm going to kind of do a high level bird's eye view of what I'm working on in the blockchain ecosystem, and then just what I see and what I love about it. And hopefully you'll find a few things to take away. I will say that it's a complex topic, and I have found that it's very hard to try to digest everything. So just look for a couple of takeaways and you'll be in good shape. This is a little bit of my background, and I wanted to show it to you because, and just to let you know that the blockchain ecosystem is hungry for people with all kinds of skill sets. I have a strong writing background, and while I had designs on becoming a Solidity and front-end developer, I'm writing and working to bring an understanding of what blockchain is to people. I have always had an interest in technology and sought it out in my prior work. And then in 2016, I considered buying some Bitcoin. It was $1,000. And I decided that there was no way it would hold at that price. So I didn't buy any. And of course, I regret that today a little bit, but no worries. I did start to track the technology, though. I was seeing a bit more how it was starting to be applied to mainstream business application. And I always had my banking career was always on the business side of things. And so it's really when I became hooked on it. And so let me also give a disclaimer and be upfront and say that I still have so much to learn. It is the most complex topic out there, in my opinion. As I said, don't worry about remembering everything. Some of the concepts are next level, in my opinion. But the big takeaway is to get a base understanding of blockchain, see its potential use, and ask, what problem does it solve? That is the big thing with considering blockchain technology for different applications. And just to let you know, I'll have a link at the end that I'll put in the chat if anybody happens to want this PDF. Okay, so there are two common distinctions when discussing blockchain technology. Cryptocurrency, most everyone assumes, it's hard to say most everyone now, but generally most everyone assumes that this is the entirety of blockchain, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Maybe some know about Ethereum, but you know, it's just a lot more than that. And what I've become passionate about and want to talk about mostly tonight is the utility of it all. Really, blockchain technology and how it can be used in different applications is the meat and potatoes of everything with the technology, and we'll spend most of our time getting into that. There are definitely some interesting use cases for it already. And the technology is here to stay. It's a big part of the next iteration of the internet. Here's a little fun fact. It's just one way to understand the distinction between cryptocurrency and utility. If you see Bitcoin with a small b, that represents the actual cryptocurrency. And with a large B, it represents the network, the platform, the technology side of it. And that's how it's supposed to be. But actually, many people in the industry don't even realize that. But it is just something to take away and kind of keep an eye out for. Okay, so what is blockchain technology? We're not going to get into the actual mechanics of a blockchain, but we're going to talk about, what it is. It is the technology that underpins Bitcoin and all other cryptocurrencies. A digital record of all the occasions a cryptocurrency is bought or sold, and it is a constantly growing record of blocks. And I will say also that on a blockchain, the original transaction will always be there. That's one of the interesting things about it. It's just a long running record of transactions. To get a little bit more of a basic handle on it, it uses something called distributed ledger technology, and it's always referred to as DLT. And that is made up of nodes, multiple computers linked to a cryptocurrency network, which is an oversimplification, but it really is basically a node is a computer. And that the ledger DLT creates a synchronized record of every transaction that is permanently stored. And those nodes provide checks and balances in different ways, depending on the type of blockchain it is on those networks transactions. So it keeps it safe. It keeps it trustless. We'll talk about that term again in a little bit. And another way to understand it is it's like a spreadsheet that is shared as a Google, on Google Drive. Everyone, which would be the nodes, everyone has the same copy. If someone makes a change that is not acceptable, everyone else, the other nodes, can override that change. And then the recorded data on the spreadsheet is preserved forever. So Bitcoin was introduced in, the conception was published in 2008, but I think the first transaction was in 2009. And it was by Satoshi Nakamoto. And if you're familiar with that name, you might also be familiar with the idea that nobody knows if that's a person or a group of people, a man or a woman for that matter. It has just always been part of the mystery of it. But it is a brilliant technology that is the basis for everything in the blockchain ecosystem. There were some earlier iterations in like e-payment types of applications, but they never quite broke through like Bitcoin did. It definitely had some of its early troubles with dark money, the whole Silk Road, and some different kinds of hacks, which of course are still a possibility. But it has come a long way into the mainstream, and it's a lot more legitimate than it was considered in those early days. So a little bit about cryptocurrency, exploring it a little bit, and using Bitcoin. It is similar to money in that it has become a medium of exchange. You can use Bitcoin to purchase things or pay for services. And like Bitcoin money is a technology too, in the way it travels around the system. It helps people manage what they owe to each other. So that's a similarity as well. It's also similar to gold in that it is a store of value. It's different from gold in that gold is a hunk of metal and that, is a little bit more tangible. But taking that aside, they're both still a store of value, and it's whatever value is placed on it is what it's worth. And also, Bitcoin is similar to stocks. It is bought and sold on an exchange for the most part, and its price fluctuates based on market conditions. In fact, as I track this and other cryptocurrencies, I really think of it like the stock market. Sometimes mirrors the fluctuations in the stock market, but I don't think that's any I don't know what kind of analysis is done on that, to be honest with you, but I really look at it like that a lot. And so another little fun fact, there really isn't an actual big coin. There's no metal literal coin. So you see an image like this a lot just to represent it with the B and all of that, but it's actually not anything. All right, so just a little summary about cryptocurrencies. They can be like money, gold, and stocks, maintained on a ledger versus carrying it in your pocket or in your bank account. But crypto is kept in its own kind of wallet, which is known as a digital wallet. And anyone with a digital wallet can access the blockchain in terms of transacting on it. And just something for you to look up if you're not familiar, hot wallets and cold wallets. Hot wallets are online versions, and cold wallets are like a thumb drive type of version where you keep it in your house or your safe or whatever. So another use for crypto is that it powers different kinds of blockchain applications. Before we dive into that, though, let's talk for a minute about the evolution of the internet. So there was Web 1.0. It was the earliest version of the internet, generally a single static page hosted on a web server. Basically, it was read-only. It was mostly text, some images. Everything was all on one page. And this was generally all in the 1990s that this version of the web was out there. And I don't know if anybody would recognize something like this, but this is a mid-1990s web page that kind of represents all those characteristics to the left. And then I stumbled onto this when preparing for this talk. And I'd forgotten all about this, and I'm sorry the embed didn't work, but it's the dancing baby screensaver that was a rage there for a while back in the 90s, probably even carried over into the 2000s. So that was Web 1.0. It was the bomb at the time. Then we got 2.0, which is what we're using today, frankly. This all started in the 2000s, and it has definitely, grown. But this represents user participation, which will dynamically change content on a website. It sorts that information independent of files on a server, and that is one of the big differences that brought us into the Web 2.0. So we started to see Facebook, Amazon, Google Docs, and different applications like that. Google Docs was cool because it brought word processing onto the web and gave us some interaction with it. Since it has been around for 20 years or so, but it is better, faster, and more dynamic than when it did start. But it is still where we are for the most part, and it has done well for us. I had to do my cool slide to introduce. Oh wait, sorry. This is a 2005 version of an Amazon webpage. And I vaguely remember that. I think at that time I was looking at eBay more. But it looked kind of like this, frankly. I don't think I was doing Amazon back then. I thought that was neat. So here we are coming into Web 3.0. It's the revolution. And it's really going to take us to the next phase. It's hard to tell exactly what will happen to 2.0, but it's happening. Something is definitely happening. And so here are a lot of the components of Web 3. Definitely represents decentralization and distributed processing. Those terms used to confuse me, that they sounded so similar. You've heard about the metaverse, no doubt. Digital assets, that's what cryptocurrency is, but there's some other forms of digital assets. Of course, artificial intelligence, data science in general is a big player, machine learning, that type of thing. And then, of course, blockchain. And so as we start to explore the utility side of blockchain technology, we really have to start with Ethereum. It brought smart contracts to blockchain technology and really is what is allowing the technology itself and my passion for it and others' passion for developing with it to move forward because it was just needed. And so Ethereum is considered a layer 1 blockchain, meaning it's its own blockchain. It's not built on top of anything. It was built to be a blockchain. There's other layer 1 blockchain, Bitcoin being the first one. We talked about Satoshi. And sometimes Bitcoins are called Satoshis, by the way, if you ever happen to see that. The XTC network is who I work for. It was initially built for enterprise and trade finance. And I'll definitely get into that a little bit more. And I'm going to just go on and tell you up front what enterprise means, because again, that was one of those terms when I just couldn't get my head around it. I was always in the corporate world, and that's very basically what enterprise means. It's just rooted, not necessarily brick and mortar organizations, but kind of the old school type of business. And then Cardano is another one, and there are plenty more layer 1s. But I found it interesting to share Cardano with you because it was founded by the co-founder of Ethereum, a man named Charles Hoskinson. And then layer 2 projects are the different kinds of applications built on a layer 1 blockchain. And again, that's just a weird term too, but these are just terms that are going to be around. So you might as well kind of get some association with them. Polygon was one of the earlier ones that I recall as a way to transact your Ethereum for much less, much cheaper. So it was one of those scalability type of chains on Ethereum.
What?
Plugin is one on our XTC network, and it's an oracle for multiple data feeds. So that's an interesting use. And then Cardania is a metaverse on the Cardano blockchain. So smart contracts are really the basis of it. And the most common contract language is Solidity, but there are others, and I do spell those out towards the end. Viper, I think, is one of them, Mule, even JavaScript, which I didn't even know. And that's the language to the smart contracts are written in. And the whole gist of a smart contract is it sets forth certain conditions or certain executions that will happen when certain conditions are met. So it's all spelled out ahead of time, and nobody needs to handle it. There needs to be no middleman, that kind of thing. And I've seen some real creativity with people just trying to think of different ways to use smart contracts. And that's what's exciting to me. And it is what I initially set out to do. So maybe I'll get to do that at some point. But those contracts kick off decentralized applications, DApps, dApps, NFTs, tokenization, or some different types of applications. And then we're going to, of course, talk about some emerging use cases. So you might have figured out by now the Bitcoin network does not have smart contracts. Why? Well, it wasn't built for it. But this inspired, or was at least part of his inspiration, Vitalik Buterin, who built Ethereum. He had this vision for the decentralized apps, among other things. Let me catch up here with my notes. What does that say? Okay, so blockchain utility. All right, so just absorb some of these terms that come up. These are some already being used applications that do utilize blockchain technology that have nothing to do with Bitcoin. Or they likely have their own currency or a token which is needed to use the application. It's what you probably heard of as gas fees or transaction fees. But generally, they're not bought for store of value, although some are, in addition to what they can be used for. But we're going to get into some of these types of applications. I didn't get my terminology cheat sheet. Okay, so social and community. I think we all have some kind of a social account of some sort. My first one, I think, was Facebook. But blockchain is taking those types of things to the next level, including social media. But the metaverse, the whole virtual reality side of things is a big part of what's going on with blockchain. You can acquire some tokens of a certain, cryptocurrency and go in and buy property in the metaverse and do things like that. And you buy all the little creatures and characters and things like that. So I looked into the metaverse, and some are really banking on that being the future. And I don't think they've ruled that out or anything, but that's a cool thing. It's very social. It's very community oriented, or can be. Some rewards and engagement programs. This is sort of an interesting area to keep an eye on, but NIL is that name, image, and likeness that college athletes, I don't think high school athletes, but I'm not totally sure, but college athletes can get paid to represent, from a marketing standpoint. And there's some interesting applications with NFTs. So you've got somebody was telling me today I needed to pursue Lamar Jackson to see if he would do an NFT with, to then, have, and he would own the NFT. And so there'd be a digital record, and then you would buy it. That's sort of how that kind of thing would work. And his electronic signature is on it. Those are just some of the ways. Fan engagement involves that. XTC Network is the sponsor for the DC United men's soccer team. And we are doing some things with the fans there, with rewards and engagement programs on the blockchain. Gaming, I couldn't even talk about some of those applications. I'm not a gamer, but there's definitely some blockchain gaming applications. We've talked about NFTs. Voting systems. Oh, by the way, NFTs don't have to just be these fun things. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit in terms of more real world type of business use cases utilizing an NFT. Voting systems. This is very interesting with voting being, in question sometimes, but voting on the blockchain would keep things so transparent. Not that you would know who voted for who, but it's immutable, meaning the records cannot be changed. So once the vote is cast on the blockchain, it cannot be changed. And so that's very interesting. And there'll probably be some emerging use cases that you'll notice with that in time. I'm not saying it's on fire or anything. Community is big in the blockchain space. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term DAO. It stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And it's basically like a company that is run by its employees, but there's no hierarchy. So that's kind of a burgeoning type of community effort, but also community is sort of a voluntary thing too in the blockchain world. People are very passionate about whatever blockchain or blockchains they're interested in or that they work on. And there tends to be Discord communities spring up. Twitter is huge for blockchain, if you don't happen to already know that. And so that kind of crossover different types of community interactions. I've sort of been amazed at that. Okay, so the example here, a pixel page. This is an NFT personal profile page creator. It's a place for you to host your NFTs and create your NFTs. This is an example. All right, this is one of my favorite topics. It's definitely emerging, is the identity and data use cases. So portable data, I lost some of my notes. You know how you have to give your name for everything, or your number, your email, or your address, and everything's just out there, social security number. Well, the concept with blockchain and identity is that you own your data and identity, and you get to decide what you do with it and where it goes. And the real basic level way to explain this is you get verified by a company like Global ID. And company's not the right word, but that's just the easiest way to say it. It's a blockchain organization. They verify you. They have different levels of verification. So you can, get just fully vetted or partially vetted depending on, what you need. But then with that ID, as this grows and grows and more firms and retail businesses or just whatever online, you would not have to give out your information. You would just give out your digital ID, basically. It's called self-sovereign identity. So that's a very interesting use case that I just think is going to take off relatively soon. That's just personal. At least I'm interested in it that way. Decentralized file storage is another interesting one. We're all used to the cloud. I mean, at least in terminology, as far as storage goes. But this puts file storage on the blockchain. And so there's a couple ways to go about it. You can turn your whole file over and it gets fractionalized, your file, meaning like set of files or files of data. And it would either, if a blockchain has 100 nodes, then every file, a copy of your file would go on every one of those nodes, or you would kind of parse out your files and spread them out amongst the nodes. That's sort of the two ways to go about it. But this is an increasing use case, and it kind of leads into the medical records piece as well, in terms of data storage. It's, you know, again, it's immutable, it's forever, it's transparent, although there are private blockchains, which you can imagine would be important in the medical and financial records arena. And medical records and medical use cases in general are also taking off pretty quickly. You know, they have those consortiums with the medical groups where they're already sharing your patient history. I think I went to the doctor and they knew something that happened back in 2000 or something like that. And I hadn't had my tetanus shots and whatever. So you can imagine how this will just enhance what they're already doing. And it's a much better way to go about it. StoreX is one that I'm familiar with. That's a decentralized storage on blockchain. There's one called Interplanetary File System or File Storage, IPFS, that you may come across as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with that field. Payments and banking. I mean, that to me seemed, of course, I had a banking background, but it seemed like a natural fit in some ways. Not to necessarily take away from functions of a bank, although, you know, there's some back office processes that could be streamlined with any organization, banks included, like a mortgage department. I could see kind of automating a little bit more. But in general, payments, cross-border payments is just one of the quickest examples that people think of. Just sending funds. In this case, they would be crypto funds, say Bitcoin. It's just so cheap. There's no need to use an exchange, and it's very fast, if not instant, practically, to have person A send the money to person B. And that may not be a big thing in the United States, but in developing countries, cryptocurrencies is really on the rise for use cases like that. Stable coins. They're generally coins that are based on, they're backed, well, they're not necessarily backed. That's what people said for a long time. They're pegged to something firm, like the US dollar is a common one. And I'm just going to go out ahead and say that if I like stable coins, but I would only do one that is based on the US dollar or something like that, as opposed to some of these ones that have been having a problem recently that are trying to keep their value based on an algorithm. That has not worked on some of them recently. But the concept is legit. And a lot of the central banks, including the Federal Reserve Bank here, are considering adding this type of digital currency. It is a cryptocurrency in theory, but you might also hear it called a digital asset. One kind of creepy thing to keep an eye on as it relates to that in the central bank or the Federal Reserve Bank, if they decide to adopt it, they could then control how they pay out Social Security or disability benefits or anything like that, and maybe insist on it going to a digital currency. And there just seems to be some big brother elements to that could creep in. It's just something to keep an eye on. Refugee crisis. I got to hear somebody, Alex Gladstein with the Human Rights Foundation. He's a huge Bitcoin proponent. And he, of course, being with the Human Rights Foundation, and I forget exactly what his role is, but he's, very international, and talks about how it has really come in handy and just been very important with helping refugees flee whatever situation, a war-ravaged country, for example, without having to worry about taking money. A digital wallet, you just need to remember what they call a 12-word seed phrase. And if you can remember that, that is all you need to get somewhere safe and then access Bitcoin or whatever is on that digital wallet. And so that is a beyond emerging use case. I think that is being used a lot. Donations is another type of interesting use case. I mean, it does round out a nonprofit's ability to accept funds in different ways. And if you are a believer in the store of value aspect of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, then it could be a very, hedge isn't the right word, but a portfolio diversification option. But more interestingly, I think, is that public blockchains are transparent. So anybody can verify that a transaction was made and for how much. The blockchains are, these public blockchains are trustless. They don't require trust. Not that you can see who made the donation, but you could verify the transactions. And, if there's some illegitimate funds flowing within nonprofit organizations, this could put a stop to that. Let's see what else. Okay, real estate transactions. I think that's interesting because you could conduct a full real estate transaction on the blockchain. And there's been some experiments in Vermont, and there's a company out of California that has been doing some trial with this. And then is it the Republic of Georgia? I may be wrong about this, but I think I'm right. Georgia over there in Eastern Europe, they record all of their land holdings, real estate, and on the blockchain. So that's interesting to me. We talked about loan documentation and the fact that there are private blockchains and they can work in conjunction with the public blockchains. And I don't want to get you too bogged down with the differences, but you could imagine a bank, or like we were talking about medical records, would need to utilize a private blockchain to store some of those sensitive materials or data. And then just this company that I've become familiar with, R3, they have a Corda network that is geared towards financial institutions as a way to utilize the benefits of blockchain, but on a private setting. And then my blockchain organization, XDC Network, we're public blockchain, but we have a bridge with Corda that allows a financial institution or anybody using their private to also store things publicly, which there would be some need to do that at times. Again, I could get bogged down with that, but these are all just things to kind of know about at this point. And then enterprise. This is kind of my bread and butter of what I work on. Oh, I need to skip ahead here. So these are some of the use cases. I'm going to talk about trade finance, supply chain. That's one of the early blockchain use cases. And this Trade Lens consortium that I've got here is an effort by Maersk, the big shipping company. And I want to say Hyperledger, like IBM, they wanted to develop a consortium of shipping container companies to share their shipping data, because there are just so many pieces of paper, frankly. There's so many steps in the whole supply chain process, and they wanted to automate it when possible. And they had kind of a false start that didn't work out very well initially, but it was a trial and error type of thing. And now they've got a viable supply chain on the blockchain type of thing with their shipping companies where there's a cooperation effort going on. ISO 20022 is a new financial messaging standard that is in the process of becoming required. If you've ever heard of SWIFT, Society for Worldwide Interbank Transfers, it's the International Financial Funds Movement System. And this is going to replace SWIFT. SWIFT is all good with it, they know it. And it's just a much better standard. And the really cool thing about it is the company that I'm familiar with that has this already working, Impel, that I don't know if I've got them on here or not. No, they're called Impel. And everything's done through an API. And APIs are just big in general, application programming interfaces. And for somebody, a financial institution or any kind of bank that would want to start on this new financial messaging system would just swap out their SWIFT API for their Impel API, and it's that simple. And they can do all kinds of financial settlement, and then the messaging that goes along that says what the payment's for and different things like that. And then this last one is kind of my new favorite. I didn't know how to list it, so I just called it blockchain versus servers. So like servers in a company, the blockchain is a network of computers and nodes. Computers, basically. They store data, they process transactions, generally do everything that servers can do. However, blockchain is globally accessible and inexpensive versus a server system or farm or whatever that might need a lot of overhead, where you have to buy the servers, they have to be maintained and upgraded. So I just think this is a definitely emerging use case potential to keep an eye on. And so circling back to this TRADA token as it relates to trade finance. That is I've got listed here, $5 trillion industry. And so the whole supply chain with the shipping companies really plays into this. But if you've got somebody in, wherever, Europe, that makes a widget and they need to sell it to somebody in Australia, there's time in transit for that item to reach Australia. And the buyer in Australia doesn't want to pay for it until they get it, if they don't have to. Yet the seller, the manufacturer in Europe needs funds, needs cash flow. And so that dead time in transit, which I think the average day is 45 to 60 days prior to COVID and the recent supply chain problems. And so big banks have always done things like letters of credit and I'm just blanking on some of the instruments, trade finance instruments, but it's a way where they guarantee, they go on behalf of the buyer and guarantee payment essentially. But there has been a lot of small and medium-sized businesses called SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises all over the world that don't have access to that type of capital because they don't either know about it or they don't qualify because they just, all the different things, they haven't been in business, for a while. It's hard to compete against the big guy, all of that. And so this company, Trade Tech out of London, they, September, a full year ago now, they created an NFT on the XDC network blockchain, which is how I know about it, that represented these assets in the trade finance world. And it did two things. It opened up to investors outside of these big banks that like to invest in trade finance because it is very low risk and in steady returns like 8 to 10% annually. And it opened that up to a new class of investors, but it also provided funding for these small to medium businesses. And so it was kind of a proof point of that it could work. And they've done the next thing, which is to create a security token, not an NFT, but an actual token that has value, to basically do the same thing, but they can just do it and trade with it and do it in bigger volumes. So that's kind of been their next level thing, and that's a use case of a security token. One other on here that is interesting, worth mentioning is I know somebody with a kind of international, and really he's doing this throughout Europe, which is solar farms. The solar farms have kind of been on the rise in general, but he's looking for a way to tokenize his solar systems, the panels and the systems that run them. He wants to buy them, put them in, and then he wants to finance them through these security tokens. The same thing I just described with the trade finance. Even though this isn't trade finance, he wants to do it like that. And there's going to just be all these different kinds of use cases just like that come along, and you probably never hear about them or know about them, but this is what is going on right now, and I just think it's pretty cool. That's it from a use case standpoint, but I also wanted just to talk about opportunities real quick. It is an emerging ecosystem, and there are different ways to get involved. Blockchain developers, there are some of the languages that are in demand, but I'm 99% sure that Solidity is still the most popular one and most needed. But there's also need for front end, the whole UI, UX, and then Web3.js in my mind, which is not fully wrapped around it. Those are kind of tied together, but I think there already is a demand for that of some sort, but when the projects really start to boom, there's going to be a demand for that for sure, where you've got front-end developers, but they don't understand the back end of a blockchain. And if somebody's interested in doing that with the front-end piece and the back end, I just think you could write a good ticket for yourself. But also business skill sets. This is what happened to me. I got out of Code Louisville. I got out of my FinTech program. The FinTech program helped me, as did Code Louisville, by the way, with organizing my resume and my LinkedIn profile in terms of getting those terms in there for the algorithms to pick up and all those kinds of things. And I got a really cool job right away. And it wasn't anything to do with the programming. It was writing a blockchain course for the University of Oxford. Now I'm fresh out of a blockchain course and I'm writing a blockchain course for the University of Oxford. I've never been able to get over that, but that's what they need. They need somebody who has just an inkling of an understanding of what it is to dig in, research, and write about it. But I've moved over to this XDC network, which also came to me via LinkedIn. And there's a whole need on the communication side of things to translate, basically, somebody who understands the language and knows how to talk about it, or can fake it at least, and then communicate that back out a little bit like tonight, which I'm fumbling around, I feel like, but then some of these other areas as well. So I just kind of just let you know that if it ever does interest you, there's just all types of ways to get involved. So I can't believe it's just about the time for questions. I don't even know if this format allows for questions, or should I be looking at the chat, or I'm not sure what to do. But if anybody has questions, I'm happy to try to tackle them.
They can go ahead and either shout out any questions, or if they go to the reaction button at the bottom, they can raise their hand and we'll call on them, or they can put it in chat. We have had a couple of questions in the chat. One of which, what kinds of programming language is good for breaking into cryptocurrency?
Okay, so that's the one, Solidity, the whole smart contract is the best thing. If that's what they're talking about, the smart contracts, I would recommend Solidity at this point.
Okay. What are hyperledgers? Is it just a Linux version of DLTs?
Hyperledger, that's the question?
Yes.
That's a brand, and it's not a blockchain. It's actually just a DLT, and that's a thing where there are DLTs, the distributed ledger technology uses that don't use a blockchain, and I'm just going to blank on that right now on describing it. But I can just tell you, if you look up IBM Hyperledger, that will be able to give you a little more detail on it.
Okay. And then, do you know of any research that's currently being done to offset the environmental impact of blockchain?
Awesome question. I thought I should address that, and I just didn't. So thank you. And I'm seeing the questions. I might be caught up on the chat. Yes. Okay. So if you've heard of the merge that happened last week or the week before with Ethereum, so there's the whole concept of proof of work, which is what Bitcoin, that's their protocol. It's a proof of work, and it requires all that mining to solve the complex puzzle, the algorithmic puzzle, to get the chance to put the transactions on the blockchain, and then you earn Bitcoin as a miner. And it's those mining operations that caught all the attention from the environmental, perspective in terms of how much electricity they're being used. So some of the reports are that, they use enough electricity to power a small country. And so these different types of protocols have come along, and the other main one is called proof of stake, which doesn't really require mining. It doesn't require mining. You have to stake your crypto, and Ethereum is the biggest one. That's what they just went to with this merge. They changed from proof of work to proof of stake. One of the main reasons is environmental, but also proof of stake is more scalable. And it will allow them to grow better and ultimately, be more accessible. The XDC network blockchain is a delegated proof of stake, which means we have master nodes, and participants vote on who can hold a master node, and then they keep an eye on. They have to behave, and they can be attacked by the other ones. It's a very secure type of blockchain in that sense, but also it's a very low energy usage. And so our whole blockchain uses about the equivalent of a house's energy in a year's time, just to give you a little bit of a comparison there. So that's a big plus. And the whole awareness factor of the environmental piece, and I'm trying to make sure I answered that question appropriately, but it is moving in the right direction for sure. And a lot of our chain, for example, is carbon neutral, in meaning we don't have a carbon footprint. And then we even want to go in, the other direction and be carbon negative. Is that the word? So a lot of people are giving their projects that kind of attention as well. So it's been well received. Okay. Okay, I see a question here. Is there a version or vision of Web3 that is separate from blockchain technology? Well, yeah. When I had that one slide up that showed, the different things we talked about, artificial intelligence, that's all part of Web3 that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with blockchain. Data science in general, machine learning, artificial intelligence is a really interesting one to look into. And I don't know if you've ever heard about the deep fake Tom Cruise, but that's a real interesting little study if you want to look something up about artificial intelligence. It's creepy, and it looks just like Tom Cruise, but it's where they've digitized him based on, the artificial intelligence and machine learning aspects of him, his presence on the web or whatnot. So that's a big one. But yes, it's not just about blockchain. All right, peer-to-peer, how's it regulated? Okay. This is a complex question about from Martisha about how does blockchain work in terms of regulatory, and that is its own topic. And I'm surprised that I'm interested in it because it sounds like a boring topic, but it's not. It's so needed. For example, the United States is behind the times on our regulatory stance as it relates to blockchain and cryptocurrency. I should just say cryptocurrency. The SEC, should it be regulated, and is it a security, basically, is the question. And they're trying to do these tests and things, but they won't just come out and say. Europe is in pretty good shape with their regulatory standpoint and stance, and they also have very good data protections. It's called GDPR, if you've ever come across that. And a lot of blockchain applications have to incorporate GDPR requirements into their applications. So what others are doing around the world with their regulations help the whole process, but it is still such a young industry that it's just taking time. As what backs a blockchain, that's just it. It is very hard to answer that question. You do need the token or the crypto that's on the blockchain to have some kind of value ultimately. And then the projects that run on it need to be good projects. They don't need to be shams and things like that. So if it's the kind of thing that you're looking into from an investment standpoint, you just should really do your research. I don't know if I touched on a lot of that, but that might be the last one I see on here. But if there's other ones, let me know.
I think that's all of the ones that we have in chat. Does anyone else have any questions?
Well, I guess this has been good for you all. I've enjoyed talking about it. I love to talk about it. And I really do believe that it's just so much more than crypto. So take that away, if nothing else.
Right. Looks like we have one person raising their hand.
If I could.
Hello,
Jay Quizen.
John Quisenberry. Hi there.
Hey.
I guess with regards to Bitcoin specifically, I've been sort of the Warren Buffett follower of this, especially watching El Salvador and the issues they're going through with their implementation down there. But more specifically to the blockchain technology itself. So you do see a lot of growth in regards to that area specifically.
Blockchain or Bitcoin?
Yes. Blockchain, yeah. But Bitcoin, just the blockchain technology itself.
Oh, definitely. I 100% believe that it's not going away, for one, but that it's just adding value across the board. Not across the board, but in large ways over time. I mean, it's obviously complex and hard to understand, so it's not mainstream, but it's getting there.
Well, as you mentioned, I have a background in finance and accounting as well, and I've been watching all this with bated breath over the past few years, but just been a bit hesitant with regards, to the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency side itself. But the blockchain technology seems very interesting to me. Yeah,
and keep an eye on it. I mean, I continue to be amazed almost every day. There's the market's very down, but this is rooting out, the less serious players. So it's good in that sense for sure. But also the projects are just hunkering down and building. And so when the market comes back, it's just going to kind of explode from a project standpoint. Hopefully from a price standpoint too, but definitely we'll see some interesting projects. They're already kind of creeping in anyway. People are launching them. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you all so very much for joining us. And please join us. Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to put this link in the chat real quick, and I'll also send it to you, Emily. If that's excellent. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll be happy to share it out along with a link to this recording, which will probably get out either tomorrow or Wednesday on Slack. So please join us again next week. We are going to have a couple of folk from the University of Louisville Cybersecurity Certificate Program coming and talking about cybersecurity. So thank you all so very much for joining us. Cathy, thank you for the talk. I definitely learned a lot that I just had no idea about when it came to blockchain and everything else. So
Awesome.
thank you all and have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good luck.
Bye.